to be also technically efficient in the usage of the scarce resource. These abstract principles put on the table, there is, of course, such a thing like services of general interest, for instance, broadcasting, and it's very clear and it's very legitimate, and all governments have the obligation to take care of this one. So there must be the possibility to designate spectrum for services of general interest. But this needs to be justified, and that is the homework we in the Commission cannot do for you, because this is essentially a national question. You need to decide how much broadcasting you want to have and how much broadcasting you want to afford. This process of deciding should very clearly be proportionate, transparent, and objective. Here, EU regulation comes into play because it says very clearly that these principles apply. EU coordination can nevertheless take place. Although these are national decisions, we think that we could work towards common objectives, and we try to achieve a consensus of member states. That is very difficult because the situation in the member states is different, but nevertheless this is a desirable goal in our view. We have published a communication on the digital dividend in November 2007, and we have, amongst the usages which are in discussion, focused on broadcasting, wireless broadband, and multimedia mobile operations primarily for this band. Our communication calls for a coordinated approach at EU level, because we think there are advantages of overcoming the present fragmentation. We clearly support the GEO6 framework. We do not plead for renegotiating this one, but we plead for using its flexibility as best as possible, and that is largely untested for the time being. We think that there should be opportunities for EU-wide markets, and that can be done through reinforcing the internal market, looking that there is as much interoperability as possible, and capitalization on the innovation potential which is behind this new spectrum band. In essence, what we propose, as I indicated earlier, is clustering the band by network types. That is not clustering by services. I plead for noting this difference. It's clustering by network types. We had in our original proposal, and under the discussion we had at the time, identified 3 clusters. I think our view has a little bit evolved since, but it is important to note that our communication does not say how large these clusters are. It does not say where the clusters should lie. Since our communication, there has been the decision, of course, of the WRC07 on the reallocation of the 790-862 megahertz band. We want to propose, or we propose a flexible coordination. We want to have, the national management of the spectrum preserved, but in an EU-coordinated framework. And it is clear that the digital dividend is a gradual process. We cannot have a big bang sort of solution for the whole of Europe. This is roughly what the picture looks like. It's very schematic. The big square is the UHF band as a whole. And if I find the pointer here, this little dot here, this area here is the part of the digital dividend where we would see the present broadcasting allocated on decision at national level justified as general interest services. This leaves us with the sort of trapeze area, and here we distinguish 2 clusters. In technical terms, this is called unidirectional high-power networks. These are the broadcasting networks you find today. And on the right, you find bidirectional low-power networks. These can be cellular mobile networks, fixed wireless access networks, etc. You see that there is a limit there. As our communication says, this is indicative, so we have not decided with this communication where the limit is. This is the discussion we are conducting now. Nor is it clear where the limit is here, because it can be very different in the different member states how much spectrum we want to allocate for broadcasting and set aside. And the last thing I would like to say is that this area here is, of course, open for an extension of broadcasting, but in this area, all applications compete on the same footing. Right. The current status is that our communication has been looked at by the member states in Council of Ministers, and conclusions have been adopted in June last year, general support. EU coordination is recognized, but there's a strong accent on keeping national decisions and not going for binding EU measures. Originally, the Council asked us to put proposals on the table by November 2008. We told Council that this was a little bit optimistic. Then there is the report by the European Parliament, adopted in September last year. It went a little bit more concrete. It estimated that the digital dividend could be around 100 megahertz. It supports a strong EU coordination, but based on national strategies very clearly. And it points to something which we also have mentioned in our communication, that there is a possibility for a win-win situation for all if we do it intelligently. That is, we have to find a balance of general interest objectives, such as broadcasting and social services, against targets of promoting wireless communications like broadband access and overcoming the digital divide. Other applications are also mentioned, but not expanded on. And the Parliament asked us to propose something by the end of 2009. Furthermore, we have been very active and have given mandates to the CPT, that is the Assembly of the Experts from National Administrations on Spectrum. These mandates look or ask the CPT with their expertise to look into the technical problem. When you simply say you cluster, it is not an easy thing to decide whether this is feasible or not. This is expert work, very complicated work. A series of reports have been prepared by CPT. How could unidirectional networks coexist? How could uni- or bidirectional networks coexist? How can we apply the so-called WAPEX approach? That is, can we be technology and service neutral in using these bands? And finally, a last report on the so-called white spaces. There is now a very important work going on in CPT, and that concerns precisely the band 790 to 862 as a first priority. CPT is to submit concrete ways on how to organize this band in the course of 2009.
Mr. Niepold, please, yes. You have already exceeded the time limit.
Well, I'll try to be very fast. Thank you very much for reminding me. Here, we see that the digital dividend band cannot be considered in isolation. Because if we talk about broadband strategies, as was mentioned by the ministers, broadband can be supported by many means, also by different wireless bands, and we have to see the digital dividend in context. I list in the slides a certain number of bands which are related. The next steps are that we are now preparing what we call a roadmap that is discussing the possible scenarios, doing impact analysis on how we can organize ourselves, and the Radio Spectrum Policy Group will be closely associated. That is the Member States' high-level experts. The scope of this roadmap, which is to be submitted by the end of this year, is to give an orientation frame of the members. That is this time define roughly how the clusters should look like, give implementation targets, possibly timings, and also describe to what extent member states can deviate from this plan, because we need to build in flexibility, and this flexibility needs to be defined. It is planned that this roadmap will be validated by the European Parliament and by Council. To do this work, we are in the process of a major study, and if I say study, that is not work we outsource and then get results back. No, this is a public discussion. And in fact, this consists of stock-taking of the situation in member states, doing socio-economic analysis on the different usages, what do they bring, what is their efficiency, analyzing the external constraints, technical issues, costs in reallocating, etc., and then developing different scenarios, measuring their impact, and making recommendation for a roadmap. Milestones, what is important for you? There will be a stakeholder meeting in form of hearings on the 6th of March 2009, and 3 different industry areas will be heard separately. Member States consultation will take place probably on the 1st of April. It's not a joke, but we are still confirming this date. And the Radio Spectrum Policy Group will be massively involved in this one. A first RSPG position paper on this question is expected for mid-May. Results of the study, at least in the headings, in June 2009. We will then, together with the RSPG, review these proposals, and there should be an RSPG opinion by November 2009, and more or less at the same time proposal for a roadmap from the Commission. Conclusions, digital dividend is really a unique opportunity. Don't be fooled around. This will not happen again in the next 50 years. There is a potential win-win situation for many users, for many usages, but we need to carefully consider how we go about this. And we need to start early with the planning. That is very important. Flexible usage should be our guiding target, and we need to very clearly overcome the traditional appropriations of the UHF band. and future-proof approaches are required. Europe is a complex animal. It is fragmented. There are legacy usages. We know this, and everybody is conscious about this. Yet recognize that there is an added value in a coordinated EU approach. And if we speak about gradual implementation, that does not mean that you can wait. You should be very fast in starting this discussion and being concrete. It's a political challenge. We have the Lisbon objectives. In these times of crisis, competitiveness, jobs are very important. And finally, it's an objective of the EC also to promote innovation. Thank you very much.